All right, Ranger fans, we are back with our special guest, Statboy Steven, all the way from Ireland, hanging out with us a little bit today. Steven, how are you?
Good, good. It's been a busy summer, but right back into it with Rangers at the draft and free agency, and we got a new coaching staff. Prospect development camps underway. So yeah, uh, this is. I know this sounds weird, but this is my favorite time of the year when it comes to hockey. I love the off season. I love free agency, potential offer sheets. I love prospect development camp. You might see a gem or two that no one saw coming, like the Flyers a couple of years ago signing Philippe Myers as an undrafted 18-year-old out of camp. So this is where also the guys that you've had in your system for a couple of years will have to step up and earn their spot on the team because that's going to be the goal for a lot of them.
Hey, real quick, Steven, are you getting feedback? Are you hearing two voices?
Nope.
Anybody in the chat? Does everything sound okay? Anybody who's watching? I'm just getting it maybe in my headphones.
Is
All
it
right.
better now?
Well, let's go forward then.
Okay.
Maybe it fixed itself. No, it didn't. Ah, all right, here, I'm gonna take my headphones off and hopefully it doesn't bother me too much. But okay, let's talk about the draft real quick, Steven. Let's talk about our first round pick and Gabriel Perot.
Yeah, hard to have any issue with the pick. You know, he was by far the best player available, still left on the board. A couple of guys that were falling, like Oliver Moore, who I was very hopeful for, but he went, I think, 19 to the Chicago Blackhawks. Chicago, very good first round. Of course, you get Bedard and then Oliver Moore, one of the best skaters in the draft. But the Rangers at 23 end up with Gabriel Perot, played for the U.S. National Team Development Program, broke the points record in a single season previously set by Austin Matthews. And this guy was on fire all year. Plays right wing, plays left wing. Was on a line with Will Smith and Ryan Leonard, who both went in the top 10 this year. And they're going to be playing together in Boston College. So the Rangers made a no-brainer pick. You know, they didn't overthink it. They didn't trade down. They didn't trade up. They just did what the best they could have with the 23rd overall pick.
Yeah, that was one thing I know when they had the chance to draft at 23. It seemed like the obvious pick. I know other people would argue that there was a couple other players available, maybe Musty or someone like that. But I think overall, Rangers fans, I know Twitter was seemed like they all were happy for a change, all at the same time. Everybody was pretty happy, so it was
Yeah.
nice to see that.
Yeah, this was probably the first time I've ever seen Ranger fans in unison being this positive about a first round pick. Aside from the two lottery selections in Kako and Lafreniere, of course, um, everyone seemed on board with this pick. So yeah, no, there's nothing we can say in like even to criticize the pick. Like the other guy that I really wanted was Tanner Molendijk, who went in the next pick to Nashville, one of the best defensemen in the draft. And like you said, guys like Quinton Musty and Callum Ritchie were also in that group of players that were available there that would have been good picks. But Gabriel Perot was projected to go top 10 by a lot of people. If he's there at 23, go for it. The draft is there to go for upside. You know, you don't go for depth players in the draft. You can get those players in free agency. You can get those players in trades. The draft is where you need to go all out on upside. So they made the right call.
And then looks like the development camp ended today with a scrimmage. Overall, following everything on Twitter, it seemed like a guy like Adam Tora, Ben Hoffman, Perot, uh, who else? Brett Berard, all had good camps. They were sort of the standouts.
Yeah, prospect development camp is quite short. It's only a couple of days, and it's to get your own prospects in. especially the ones you just drafted last week. Also, some invitees, guys that aren't under contract, but sometimes they invite them because they want to have a closer look at them, maybe draft them in future years. In rare cases, like I mentioned before, Philip Myers to the Philadelphia Flyers, they get signed after prospect development camp. Um, but yeah, unfortunately for Ranger fans, there's no way to attend it like you can do at other teams. I know that I've been to the Seattle Kraken practice facility. It's really cool. Yeah, 500 people can easily fit in there. Other teams as well, the St. Louis Blues, the Montreal Canadiens, they all allow fans at the prospect development camp. But unfortunately, the Rangers play in a building where there's no space for fans to even stand behind the glass. It's a very limited building in terms of capacity. So the Rangers never had that opportunity. They did it a couple of years ago in 2019 when their facility in Terrytown was being renovated. They had their prospect development camp somewhere in Connecticut. I forget where exactly, but that was available to fans. I really hope the Rangers do something like that in the future because, especially when you had the higher picks like Kako and Lafreniere, of course Lafreniere was during COVID, but still, that's what you want to showcase to your fan base. And you have guys, of course, as you mentioned, Adam Sikora, Brennan Hoffman, Brett Berard, Gabriel Perreault. Those are the standouts, but those are also expected to be the standouts. I wouldn't put too much value in them being the standouts in this prospect development camp, but it's a good thing they are. Um, what's important for those, well, except for Perot because he has to go back to college, for Sikora, Berard, and Othman, it's important to continue this trend into preseason where they're going to be on the ice against our AHL players like Will Cooley and Zach Jones and Matt Robertson, and also our NHL players. That's when you can actually see what you can expect from these guys. Adam Sikora is only turning 19 in September. He's still very young. Brett Berard is only turning 21 in August. Brendan Hoffman turned 20 last January. These kids are very young. Um, so I wouldn't say they have a spot on the team wrapped up, but there is still a hole at right wing behind Blake Wheeler and Capo Caco on the third line. There's an opportunity for someone to snatch that spot. Maybe someone like Cooley, Othman, or Sikora or Berard, they can all fit in there if they earn it in preseason.
But right now, if you had to play odds, you think Offen's probably going to start in the AHL with the Wolfpack.
My expectation is that everyone who hasn't played any NHL yet is likely to start in Hartford unless they turn heads in preseason. And this also comes down to the coaching staff. Everyone knows who Peter Laviolette is, but to me, the interesting part is the assistants. You have Dan Muse, who was coaching the national team development program for the last 2 seasons. Michael Pekka, who was with the Buffalo Sabres, who as a player won 2 Selkie trophies. Um, those two guys are younger guys behind the bench, but have head coaching potential, in my opinion. I wonder how much of an impact those two guys will have on team selection in preseason. And who knows? Maybe if one of those guys turns heads, then they might start on opening night. But considering their ages, it makes sense if they start in Hartford. Yes.
Yeah, I think it'd be great if they went down there and played for 2 3 months, and if there are injuries, well, then they've been playing that time in the system, and
Hmm.
they can come up sort of not that they would have NHL experience, but they would have pro hockey experience. Of course,
Yeah.
Hockey played a couple years ago in that men's league, but you know what I'm trying to get at. They would have they wouldn't have to get the feet wet. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. You saw that with Carl Hagelin. I think that was in 2011. Spent, I think, 2 months in Hartford, came up, never looked back. Of course, he was a little older. I think he was 23 at the time already, or 24 even. But still, a couple of months in Hartford, and then you come up. The only thing I'll say about Othman, though, the style of hockey he plays is something the Rangers desperately need. Even with the acquisitions they've made in free agency, they still need someone on that third line who can play with physicality, who doesn't shy away to go into the corners and work for the puck. So maybe the style of hockey Othman plays gives him a little bit of an edge over the others.
Also, right before we went on, I saw, I think it was Vince. I think Vince, Mercogliano on Twitter said that he's gonna, stay in New York and work out with the NHL guys this summer.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what you hope from your young kids, right? Their dream is to make it to the NHL, but they know that they have to work for it. Like I spoke to Hoffman many times over the last 2 years. The kid knows what he needs to do. He understands that he needs to work for it. His father and his uncle played professional hockey in Switzerland, so he grew up in that culture, in that environment, and knows what it takes. As you mentioned, he spent a year playing pro hockey in Switzerland before he was drafted. So, like mentally, I think he's ready. The question is, can he physically be ready on opening night to make the roster? And to stay in New York, that's the perfect decision by him. If he stays in New York and works with Ranger coaches and trainers, that's the right thing to do. And you know, not that I want to move move our conversation away from this topic, but I wish someone like Lafreniere would do that more often.
Well, you brought it up, so I did see something on Twitter yesterday. You were going back and forth with somebody saying that I think you said it was on Arthur Staples' podcast. A
Yeah,
guy like that said he's not the kind of person that's working out or
yeah. I
I
think
don't remember exactly what he said.
well, Steve Alec
Basically,
had mentioned Steve Alec
that
had mentioned on Arthur Staples' podcast that the early years, 18, 19, 20 years in a player's professional career are the prime development years. Those years are the ones where you need to develop. If you lose out on those development years, you're always going to be one step behind when you're older. And with Capo Caco, there is the sense that he's putting in the effort and he's dedicated to get to where he wants to be. But with Lafreniere, I don't know if this is like warranted or anything, but there is this feeling about Lafreniere that he isn't as dedicated as he should be, that he doesn't put as much effort in as he should be. But again, this is just perception. And the reason I spoke about it on Twitter to someone yesterday is we were talking about perception based on what people see on social media. And I'm not saying that Lafreniere should not have fun. He should be able to go out with his friends and play a pickup softball game with his family, and that's fine. But as a professional hockey player, you need to also understand if you are not meeting expectations, how will it be perceived if I post this on Instagram, if I post that on Twitter? How will fans react to it? I think that's an important part of being a professional athlete. You need to understand how something will be perceived as you post it. Like I'm not a professional athlete, so I don't really care. If people have a problem with me on social media, then so be it. It's not going to affect my job. It's fine. I'm not a professional athlete. I'm not in the limelight. I'm not on TV. I don't play sports, whatever. But for a guy like Lafreniere, he needs to understand that if he only posts about hanging out with friends and having fun and playing some pickup baseball games or whatever, and then he comes in on opening night and he has another bad season, that's going to only fuel fans even more to criticize him. And I think that is where I know the Rangers recently have started doing this, give players social media training. I think they need to do that a little more. They need to really focus on that because with Lafreniere, and like I said earlier, it doesn't mean that he's not working out. It's just that people don't see it that he's working out. Like Capo Caco's Instagram isn't filled with him playing pickup soccer games with his friends, and like I think last year there was a picture of him at a festival drinking like a can of gin soda or whatever. But there's also interviews he does with Finnish media about his workout sessions with Ismo Lekkonen, the father of Arturi Lekkonen, who works out with Mikko Rantanen as well. So there's news from about him working out that reaches the fan base. And with Lafreniere, that's not really the case. His first off season, that was the case because he was with the Billet family in Connecticut. He worked out with Ben Prentice. But after that first off season, there hasn't really been that kind of news about him working out in the off season.
That's really interesting. You brought up a great point. Perception is everything. I mean,
Mhm.
you see these guys on social media and they are working out. Well, like, even if they're struggling, you're like, well, we know this guy's working out. He's doing everything he can. But if it's all fun and games and like, look at me, I'm doing this, doing that, there's no working out. We don't know if he's completely 100% bought into
Yeah,
what he's doing. He's trash. So,
yeah,
like,
and
yeah,
then
perception is everything.
I think
Um,
yesterday there was a picture of Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider somewhere in Sweden at a football game. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Zibanejad put up 90 points. Chris Kreider's top 10 in the league in goals over the last 2 seasons. I don't need to see them working out. I know they do, but it would help Lafreniere's case a lot if he would just post like some pictures of like 10-second videos of him actually working out. I think that would silence a lot of the critics.
yeah, it's a good point. What do you think about the all the free agent signings for the Rangers that they did on Saturday?
Well, the Rangers were in a tough spot. They didn't have much cap space, and of course, this was in part due to Jeff Gorton with the contracts he gave out. But Chris Drury didn't do himself any favors either. So the situation he was in, he contributed to it himself. But considering the situation we were in, I think he did really well. If you were able to sign Jonathan Quick, Blake Wheeler, and Eric Gustafson, all for less than $900,000 base salary, you're doing a really good job. Blake Wheeler for one season to be a stopgap at right wing, that's a great signing. Jonathan Quick is the backup goalie. I don't know how good he will be, but Yaroslav Halak is probably too expensive for this team at this point. And Eric Gustafson is probably my favorite free agent signing this
Same.
offseason. He put up 40 plus points last season with Washington and Toronto. A couple of years ago, he had 60 points with Chicago for a defenseman. Now, I don't expect that kind of production because he's going to be on the third pair. I doubt he's going to get a lot of power play time, but it's nice for Braden Schneider to have an option on his left side that can actually move the puck because he played with Patrick Nemeth. He played with Justin Brown. Last season, he played with Ben Harper. I think he played. Did he play with Jared Tenorti at some point the season before that? Maybe. Um, and then, of course, a couple of games with Zach Jones. There hasn't been any stability on the third pair on the left side. Nikola, after the deadline, was a really good pickup, but they couldn't afford him. Getting Eric Gustafson for 800, I think 825,000 for 1 year, really good pickup. Overall, Drury had a really good start to free agency. Really happy with that.
I saw someone posted a stat about Gustafson I think he had 41 points last year, and Klingberg had like 43 points,
Hmm.
and Klingberg got 4.15 in Toronto, and
Yeah,
Gustafson got the 8.25. I really like that signing.
yeah.
I live down here in
If
Maryland, so
Gustafson
I
gets
saw a
half,
lot of the Caps games,
yeah.
and he was sort of an afterthought for the Caps last year. But when I watched the Caps, he was pretty solid, and when Carlson got hurt, he was getting top 4 minutes, which is probably, a little too much to ask for someone like him, but he did pretty well, and for him to be like a 6th defenseman, I think it's a great signing, and I kind of concur with you that that was my favorite.
Yeah, yeah, and look, I don't expect him to get 40 points, but if he gets half that for $800,000
Yeah.
from a defenseman, I'll take that any day. And yeah, you bring up a good point. When Carlson was out, he was playing top 4 minutes. There's like the Rangers have been very lucky over the last couple of years when it comes to injuries on defense. We haven't really had to deal with any big absences. Lindgren was out for a couple of weeks last year, of course, last season, earlier this year. But if one of those guys goes out for a month or two, having Eric Gustafsson, even as let's say Zach Jones makes the team out of camp and Gustafsson is your seventh defenseman, I'm very happy to have him as a seven. If Gustafsson makes the team out of camp and he's the sixth and he moves up to the top four when Miller or Lindgren is out for a couple of weeks, you could do a lot worse than Eric Gustafsson for $800,000.
That's agreed. And of course, we love the Blake Wheeler signing. Um, what do you think about Nick Bonino? Looks like he's going to slot in as a fourth line center.
Yeah, Benino gives the Rangers more flexibility when it comes to Barclay Goodrow, who's been centering that fourth line over the last 2 years a lot, of course. And that's where the third line right wing position comes into play as well. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a very veteran heavy lineup on opening night where Bonino is centering the fourth line with VZ and who's the other guy? Pitlick, Tyler Pitlick. And Goudreau would be the right wing on the third line with Hedel and Lafreniere. And then the top six would be Kreider, Zibanejad, Kako, or Kreider, Zibanejad, Wheeler, and then Panarin, Trocheck, Kako. That's probably the most likely scenario for opening night unless someone blows them away in preseason. And that's the asterisk that I put after every sentence almost during the offseason. Because we simply don't know how good a young player is going to be in preseason. I don't think many people expected Derek Stepan to make the team in the summer of 2010. But he made the team opening night, scored a hat trick, and never went to the AHL for a single day. So
Yeah, I remember that game. Boy, how quickly time flies. He's
that's
pretty much,
13 years ago.
yeah, almost. He's still a free agent, but it looks like he's probably gonna get like a PPO with somebody. Any of the signings around the league, just to go, 30,000 foot here on the NHL. Any of the signings in the whole league that surprised you?
Ryan O'Reilly signing for 4.5 million a year. That's to me that's the biggest surprise. Not that he's going to Nashville. That's not a big surprise, but he's like 31, 32. Won a Selke, won a Conn Smythe, was really good in Toronto last year. Doesn't play his age. He plays like he's 26, 27 still. For him to get him for 4.5 million a year, that's a steal for Nashville. That was to me that was a bargain. Um, I'm kind of surprised at what they're doing in Toronto. They're like 4 or 5 million over the cap by now. That or
Yeah,
maybe even more than that. They have to make a move. They went after Tyler Bertuzzi, who's a good player, but it's Tyler Bertuzzi. Is he really going to be the answer for the Maple Leafs? They still need goaltending. Their goaltending situation hasn't changed, and their defense. Who did they sign? Did they sign Klingberg?
they signed Klingberg and they signed Max Domi.
Oh yeah, they signed Domi too. Yeah, Domi, I like for them. In the playoffs, they can definitely use him. I don't think Klingberg solves any of their defensive issues though. You mentioned it earlier that the point distribution, Klingberg and Gustafsson, and I remember seeing that tweet. I forget who it was, but there was a third guy in there that's also getting paid 4 million by someone. Is it Ekman? Ekman? No, not Ekman Larson. Um. Anyway, yeah. If you get a guy like for the Rangers, 40 points for 800,000, that's great. Look, Toronto, I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. They might have to wait a long time before they win another playoff series because the team has not improved.
A lot of I see a lot on Rangers Twitter, and they get angry when they see the Devils make moves, and we're just sort of sitting here waiting or whatever. They added Oli, they gave Karen Govich, who was I thought a pretty good player. But I still am not sold on the Devils. I mean, I don't know who their goalie is, and right now their defense is starting 2 rookies, maybe.
Mhm.
So I mean, I know Luke Hughes is a top prospect, and the other defenseman, Nemec.
Simon
Uh,
Nemec, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you expect those guys to come in and play 20 minutes a night and hold up in the NHL. But the Devils have amazing top nine. They
Yeah.
have an amazing top nine. But I don't know if the defense and the goaltending can hold up unless they address it.
Yeah, for me, the goaltending is the big question mark. If they get a good goaltender, then to me, they're one of the top teams in the East.
Yeah,
I think the goaltending would make up a lot for having those two rookies on the team. I think Luke Hughes and Simon Nemec are going to be on the team. I know they lost Ryan Graves. He signed with the Capitals, I think.
he signed with Pittsburgh.
Oh, Pittsburgh, yeah. Um, but yeah, the defense wasn't really their strength last season either. Well, I mean, on an individual level, they didn't shine because they had star defensemen. They shined because they had a system where their defense worked. So that makes it a little easier for them, I guess, to replicate that. Whereas for the Rangers didn't make any changes, and for the Rangers to improve, the only thing they can do is change the system. So right now, I don't have the Rangers as a top two team in the Metro, and depending on how other teams in the Metro start, I don't know how big the battle is going to be for the third spot. So hopefully Laviolette can work some magic for us. But the Devils, yeah, the Devils have a good team. They put together a good team. They added to Foley. They still have Broad down the middle. They have Hughes and Heischer. Timo Meyer signed an extension with them. They still have Andre Palat, I think. Um, did they lose the other winger? What's his name? Tatar.
Tatar was a free agent,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
they did lose.
yeah. But you add a guy like Tyler Toffoli, who if and this is the thing with some of these moves, right? General managers are often chasing previous results, and you see the same thing in contract extensions. Players are always paid for what they did in the past, not for what they might do in the future. And you see that with trades like Toffoli and um, the Matt Duchene buyout. Like Matt Duchene, um, yeah, I mean he could be a good player, but there's you never know when a player falls off a cliff, and it's very risky to invest in a player like Matt Duchene now, or to trade too much for a guy like Tyler Toffoli. Luckily for the Devils, they didn't give up too much. It was Sharon Govich and a third. So they're hoping that Toffoli can keep up his current performance and that Sharon Govich doesn't break out. But Sharon Govich is going to be in Calgary. Nobody breaks out in Calgary. So
Yeah,
um, I'm surprised Jonathan Huberdeau is there was never any talks about him getting moved because Calgary seems to be a place where everybody wants to get out now.
yeah. I was listening to Elliot Friedman's 32 Thoughts today, actually, and it was like their season end wrap. And when they talked about Calgary, he said that right now they're in a kind of wait and see and let the dust settle kind of mode. And they actually mentioned Huberdeau being a leader right now. He's calling the draft picks, making sure everybody has what they need going forward. So, because that's kind of was his job in Florida, but it wasn't necessarily his thing last year. So it looks like he might be stepping up. I hope he does because I had him in fantasy last year and he was terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably the worst guy you could have picked up in your fantasy draft.
Thanks, Steven.
But the year before, if you had him the year before, man,
He had 110 points or
yeah,
115 points, something ridiculous.
yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, look, the Rangers, their off season so far has been good, all things considered. Yeah, of course, you want them to go after a big free agent, maybe, but you don't have the cap space. What are you going to do? And today is the deadline for filing for salary arbitration.
Yeah,
The only player on in the Rangers organization that's eligible is Brandon Scanlon in the AHL. Um, If he doesn't file for arbitration, then the Rangers will not be eligible for a buyout in the second window. Now, not that it's really relevant because the buyout in the second window is only for players with a cap hit of 4 million and higher. So Goudreau wouldn't even be eligible. Just wanted to throw that out there in case it came up.
Yeah, so, I didn't know that, so I just learned that. So, I think Gaudreau's on the team at training camp, no matter
Yeah,
what.
I know Ranger fans are saying, well, maybe there's no market for Goudreau and this and that. I think there's a market for Goudreau. I just think that Drury doesn't want to trade him. I think Drury feels comfortable enough to hold on to him because he thinks Goudreau is an integral part of this team.
Elliot Friedman said something else where he said, teams this year that will take on, bad contracts like Arizona or Chicago, that the price went up, and you see that with the second round pick for, Josh Bailey getting bought out. Um, Arizona, didn't they take somebody? And I'm blanking here.
Yeah, but so the thing is, Josh Bailey had 1 year left. So you are basically getting a second round pick from the Islanders to buy out Josh Bailey. So
Yeah,
you're buying a second round pick for I think it was 2.5 million or something. That's that's the price of a second round pick in the NHL. It's like we have actual value added to a second round pick now. That's what a second round pick costs. About two to 3 million. Goudreau still has 4 years left on his deal.
yeah,
And
big
year
difference.
3 and 4 are the most expensive years on his contract. Because he's making 5.1 and then next year 5 million. That makes it less appealing to a team like Arizona. Arizona is a team that takes on contracts where the cap hit is higher than the actual money owed
Right.
because they can pay a player 3 million, but they get a cap hit for 5 million, and it's easier to get up to the cap floor that way without spending actual money. Players that are on LTIR, they usually don't cost as much as you would think because insurance covers a lot. So getting a guy like I think Shea Weber's on their books now.
Yeah.
They had Chris Pronger, who was already retired. Pavel Datsuk, they had on the books. Marian Hossa in the past. Phil Kessel. Um, like if this was 2010, the Arizona Coyotes with those players on the books would be the number one contender in the league. But they take on players on LTIR because it's a currency for them. It's a way to get draft picks, and they used a lot of draft picks in this draft this year. But Barkley Goodrow, I think there's a market for him, but in a different way than Josh Bailey. Like Taylor Hall gets basically dumped in Chicago for nothing, so Boston can shed the cap completely. But the Blackhawks get a really good center to play with Connor Bedard for one season. So I'm sure the Blackhawks are happy to take on that cap hit for a guy like Taylor Hall. But Barkley Goodrow is no Taylor Hall. You're still
They
getting
also took, yeah, they traded for Taylor Hall, and they got Nick Foligno for
yeah,
basically nothing, right?
yeah,
No, they got 2 prospects. They got 2, probably, C-level prospects.
yeah, for two prospects that'll probably never see the NHL.
Right. That was more of like a salary dump.
Yeah, but Barkley Goodrow is a fourth liner that's signed for 3.6 million a year on average for the next 4 years. It's a completely different situation. I'm sure there's a team out there that's willing to take him on, but like I said, I don't think Chris Drury is looking to move him. Because what's the point in moving him unless you have a target that you want to go after? And even then, you have to be damn sure that that target wants to come to New York. Because if you let's say Tarasenko, you approach Tarasenko for 3.5 million. You manage to trade away Barkley Goodrow, you free up 3.5 million. You go after Tarasenko, and then he signs somewhere else. What then? What's your next move? Then you're going to have to give up assets to get a player to fill the spot that you thought Tarasenko was going to fill.
Yeah.
So it's risky, and Goudreau is one of the assistant captains on the team. I think he's a well valued team member in that locker room, and I just don't think Drury wanted to trade him in the first place.
Yeah, I'm okay with keeping him for right now. I mean, I know I never got the whole everybody let's trade or let's buy out Israel. Was there anything you wanted to talk about before we get going today?
Um, Overall, this offseason, I'm just pleasantly surprised by the Rangers. The coaching staff they put together, I couldn't be happier about. I think it's a really good mix of veterans in Phil Housley and Peter Laviolette and younger guys in Michael Pekka and Den Muse. Um, the draft was fun. Gabriel Perreault is a really good prospect to add. They made some interesting picks in the later rounds, too. Um, Drew Fortescue in the third round.
Yep.
Who will also be going to Boston College and who also played for the NTDP. And then in the sixth round, they drafted a guy, Ty Henricks.
Yeah, I saw he did well today.
Did well today. He's going to college, Western Michigan, I think, the Western Michigan Broncos. Um, and he's only going to college in 2 years. So I think he's going to play in the U.S. Hockey League for 2 years, then go to college. So you're going to get at least 5 years out of him in terms of NHL rights. Really good skater, really, really good pick that late. Has some size to it as well. Like you're talking about a sixth round pick. The expectation should be low, but Carl Hagelin was a sixth round pick.
Wasn't
I
Jesper
think
Fast a sixth
I
round
think
pick?
Jesper Foss was a sixth round pick. We have Adam Edstrom, who's currently he's now starting in Hartford for his first full season. He was a sixth round pick in 2019. He looks really good in my opinion. So yeah, just shoot for the stars with those later picks. I'm happy with that. The only thing I'm not a fan of is drafting guys that are 19 years old, like Rasmus Larsson in Sweden,
Oh
and
yeah.
Robrook, who plays in the OHL. I forget his first name. Ryan, I think, or Tyler. I don't know. Dylan Robrook. Yeah, big guy again, but he turns 19 this month. I'm just not a fan of drafting kids that are already 19 years old. I fail to see the upside in that. That's just a personal thing. But other than that, I don't have anything to complain about when it comes to the Rangers. They they did a really good job in free agency. Couldn't have done a better job, all things considered. And yeah, I'm looking forward to preseason. I'm flying in September, and for the first time, I'm going to try and attend all 6 games. So
Well, you said you're flying in here in September?
yeah, we're flying into Boston for the first preseason game there, and then we take the train into New York, and we want to try and see all 6 preseason games this
Oh,
year.
that's great.
So, so yeah, no, looking forward to it, and this upcoming season is very hit or miss for the Rangers. The talent is there, we all know it.
Yeah,
the
a lot of talent, but they got to put it together.
The challenge is
Well,
now
listen, I
on the
really
coaching
appreciate
staff.
you coming on today and taking some time out and it was great. It was great catching up. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Um, Glad that you're a happily married guy now.
Oh yeah, that's official.
All
Yeah.
right, buddy. We'll be talking. We always interact on Twitter, so
All right, sounds good.
good to see you.
See ya.
Take care.